All right, I have put together some tips for you to get organizing your information that I think will be helpful once we connect. So, I am going to send you this document, and it is a template to guide you through the process. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a few helpful tips. So, tip number 1, too much text on the screen confuses and bores your audience. You should not put your text on the screen. The majority of your text. You should put the majority of what the speaker is going to say into something that is called the speaker notes that is down here. I'm going to put up a little hand. So down here is a special place to enter the majority of your text. If we put too much on the screen, like I said, it's going to confuse and bore your audience, but you want to keep track of it. So this is where you'll enter what the speaker would say. And when it comes time, there's a way to present called presenter view, where whatever you have on the screen will be on the screen, but what the speaker will say as their audience is looking at the screen is still captured right here. And we'll get into that later. All right, so back into tip number 2. You should organize your slides like a book's table of contents with chapters, like you see here and here, sub-chapters, like you see at the pink arrows, and then delving even more deeply into detailed bullet points underneath those sub-chapters. Tip number 3. You should introduce all chapters and sub-chapters on the front end in a list form before you delve more deeply into them. That helps your audience better understand where you're headed by giving them something to hang on to as they're absorbing a lot of new information. So, for example, this might be your order of introduction. Slide number 1, you'll have a title page. Slide number 2, you would list all of the chapter titles so that your audience can see them. And then slides 3, A, B, and C might look like you show the chapter 1 title and then the list of all the chapter 1 sub-chapters. Then the next slide, you would delve into chapter 1, subpart chapter 1. Then the next slide, delve into subchapter 1, subpart chapter 2. Then the next slide, delve into chapter 1, subchapter 3. Then you would introduce the chapter 2 title and list all of the chapter 2 subchapters. Then on the next slide, you would delve into chapter 2, subchapter 1, then delve into chapter 2, subchapter 2, then delve into subchapter 2, subchapter 3. The idea is you want to list all of those subchapters for everyone and then delve into them. It will help them remember what it is that you're sharing with them and keep it organized in their heads. So for example, title of your presentation, slide 1, then a list of all the chapters. Here's chapter 1, brief description. Then we'll go into chapter 2, brief description. Then chapter 3, brief description. So chapter 1 title, chapter 2 title, chapter 3 title, very brief description so they can see them all at once before you go into chapter 1. All right, so chapter 1. Here are sub-chapters for chapter 1, sub-chapter for chapter 2, sub-chapter for chapter 3 with your brief descriptions. And then guess what? We're going to go into chapter 1, sub-chapter 1. And here are all your bullet points for it. And you can do whatever you want for those. Then sub-chapter 2, all of your bullet points. Sub-chapter 3, all of your bullet points. And now we're going to chapter 2. We only saw the title before, but now we're going to delve more deeply. Here are the sub-chapter titles. Sub-chapter 1, sub-chapter 2, sub-chapter 3. Let's dig a little more deeply. Chapter 2, sub-chapter 1. Here's some bullet points for it. Here's sub-chapter 2 and bullet points. Sub-chapter 3, yeah, now we're in chapter 3. Here's the title of chapter 3. And here are all the subchapters. Subchapter 1, subchapter 2, subchapter 3. Now let's dig a little more deeply. Chapter 3, subchapter 1. Great. Here's new information that you've never had before about subchapter 1. Subchapter 2, etc., etc., etc. You get the idea. But the idea is you introduce... You are. The idea is you... Emmeline, hang tight. I'm doing something for Pippa. The idea is you introduce all of the titles to those chapters and subchapters before you teach about them so that they get to see it twice and they'll learn it better. Here are a variety of graphs that are available for all of your subchapters when you're delving in more deeply. There are a variety of options. Pie charts, line charts, column charts, bar charts, grids, grid 2, grid 3, grid 4. There are hierarchies. Emmeline, shh. I'll fix it in a minute. Timelines. Let's get you a Band-Aid. Process.
Pippa? Is it quite Pippa or not?
Relationships. How things are related to one another. Cycles.
Say something.
I'm telling this to Pippa. Anyway, so this is all in a draft presentation, and I'll give you a template where you can start entering all of your information. If you want to, just put it all down on paper, and then we can enter it in for you. Then that works. Okay, Emmeline. Thanks. Emmeline, can you say bye to Pippa?
Bye, Pippa.